console. CNC, which is really confusing because CMC is a CMS. Right, anyway, so CMC, it looks like it was designed like 1995. It's like a whole bunch of like really engineering looking like drop-down fields and like radio buttons. It has none of this kind of field labeling, content chunking that we actually need. So I'm hoping to be able to come back with some of this knowledge, and as we start evaluating the next CMS, be able to say, okay, look, it's possible to actually choose a CMS that fits the editorial that we already have, rather than making an editor to learn some god-awful systems, right?
Good, how are you?
It's also training to figure out their CMS. To this day, I still
I understand.
IBM CMC, I dreaded it.
Yeah.
And, I'm not, I don't do that for a living. I feel sorry for people who work in marketing or editorial.
You have really good music right now.
Right. People years ago, somebody made a purchasing decision like, let's buy IBM Marcus or Commerce. Oh, great, we get this package, it's free with it, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
No, it's not fine. It's awful.
Stop looking.
All right. Well, actually, yeah. Really, the only things you need to do are like sex platform.
You still remember?
So
I thought about it.
I get a little antsy on that. My store's much older, but it's better.
No, I would, maybe I'll grab it later.
Yeah.
I would try to make this better. Is the HTML.
And I guess it's first to me
As you
that
see,
I can go.
let's say change my mind about whether I want this thing to be bold or italic a few times, and I toggle it back and forth. Then when I look at the HTML, it has like a bunch of empty bold tags, strong tags.
I didn't know Dream River was still a thing until I downloaded it. I downloaded it last week, and I'm like,
It's like every single like actually publishing on so we get the CMS to be smart enough to sort all this stuff out.
Right.
Wayne's World and then Toy Story 3 or something. It's like whenever there's like some moment where it's
Garbage styling, all the smart quotes and words and from each of your CMS is like some weird.
I haven't used that in like 2 years.
Ampersand and whatever.
Yeah, non-breaking space.
Trying to narrow down.
Yeah, there's very positive experience with that. None of them. They have.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I did notice when he was pasting it, he was pasting it from Notepad. Right. That's what I find myself doing too. I'm like, I have this good area. I find that like, oh, here's a nice, Word document. I paste it into CMS. Let me put it in Notepad.
But most people don't have.
Why should they?
Makes it
Just like some of the CMS.
I can keep the flow in my head.
Crop it, press it.
Nice, it's like a limbo. There's gonna be one time when I go through there, I'm gonna yank it right off.
You might see it.
put a chair here.
Little yellow poster.
There you go. Yeah, that should be good.
Yeah, they just,
That's actually.
yeah.
Anytime.
I might go upstairs.
So,
It's such a terrible feeling.
Rotator.
because we hang our
Right. It's, oh, you couldn't. You didn't want to make smart decisions.
Race for the subway, I had like a double
welcome back to the
I was not supervisor. So it's like, but I would wear my, but my uniform, so I'd like walk out, like, stand, and I would start like working hard. Just kind of roll. No, I didn't take it that far. If I, you know, if I talk, I really might understand that I wasn't. I know.
I'll try whatever. Yeah, it's nice to be in charge of the stuff.
So I'm really trying to. It's like to have a hero connection.
Hello. I have this. I have an easel over there if you want me to.
It's fine.
You sure? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I'll adapt.
I thought we
I was
had
going to
one.
use this, so
I thought we had one person in there. So.
I'll be all right.
Sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello, man.
We're going to talk about Lean UX today, and I hope the afternoon's been going well and today's conference has been going well. I wanted to start by asking how many people in here are using Agile? Okay. How many people feel you're doing it well? All right. How many people are doing UX at their organization? How many people are feeling they're doing that well? You got a couple more hands. All right, here comes the infamous question. How many people think they're doing Agile and UX together really well? Seeing kind of hands. That has been a continual challenge that over the last couple of years I've been working on at Highland. I've been trying to experiment with it. I wanted to share with you today some of the findings that I've had. I've got 7 tips I want to share with you about when in doubt, test it out, and getting lean with UX. What's interesting is I found this interesting graphic, and most of my career over the last 4 years has been on this right side, trying to do Agile and UX, and I'm slowly trying to move over to Lean UX. And after a raise of hands here in the audience, it seems like we're all trying to do that. We've got a little bit, we're doing that over there, we're doing some UX team design and dev team, but we're trying to move toward understanding how we can make products better. And what's interesting is it's really hard to acquire a new customer. It takes 5 times as much effort to acquire that one customer than retaining customers. And in UX, our job is to either get new customers or retain them. So over the last 4 years, my job has been attempting to retain customers, because if you keep that customer, they're your best customer, right? They love you. And then that happy customer will tell 9 other people on the average. They'll go out, they'll tell that, and happy customers is where we're trying to achieve. but how do we make customers happy? We've got to figure out how to match their mental model. Now, matching their mental model is a challenge. We've got to use analytics, we've got to use interviews, observations, we've also got a survey. And at Highland, we used to actually go out and a sales rep would go out and find out something about a product and then bring that back and we pass that knowledge down. And that worked for many years, and I imagine there's probably some companies out there that did the same thing. Then we actually went out and made our own UX department. So we built a lab and we started helping, but that's not working anymore. We're outgrowing that mentality. There's only so much that a group can do, and so much that we can improve the product. And we're just really scratching the top of that surface. There's so much more we can do with UX. We're doing some testing at the top, but how do we continue to improve? And it's challenging. But then all of a sudden, this dropped. Back in 2013, how many people here have read Lean UX? Got some hands up. How many people read it twice? I read it like 5 times. I was like, what? This is crazy. So in Lean UX, for those who are right after this going to run out and buy this book, it talks about shifting the process. Trying to move from trying to do all this upfront research, trying to gather all this information about people and saying, you know what, let's just figure that out through testing, which is different, right? We generally spend a lot of time building personas and doing research and looking at analytics. Here it's like, you know what, forget all that. Let's just jump right in and let's do some testing. But to do that is challenging. You have to build this shared understanding, which the book stresses, which really means that the designer doesn't go off into the corner anymore and design something. The developer doesn't go off and do, you work together. That takes a lot of energy. That's way different. I've been discovering that firsthand. And everyone's involved in all the meetings, so you really have to get deep into those meetings. Then Agile, right? You're supposed to be working parallel. So I'm not working ahead or behind. I'm supposed to be working in step. So that's why I'm still way far to the right. I'm still trying to get over to do this. And being able to really just have this mentality of rework. Because we always get married to what we build or what we make. But if you are willing to rework it while you're building it, that's what this is all about. So think about that. I mean, this book dropped and changed a lot of people's mentality. But in a nutshell, I wanted to boil it down to 3 easy steps. Now, I stared at this and I looked at this and I've been thinking about it. We've been trying to teach this internally. I've been trying to figure out how can this be boiled down to 3 steps. So the first step of Lean UX is thinking, right? And I'm going to give you some tips how you can do that. Then you're going to make something. All right, that sounds pretty logical. You're going to make something. But this is the part where it changes, this check. Now, check could be, I'm going to test it with customers in the lab, and maybe I'm going to run a different type of feedback. Maybe I'm going to interview people about the thing I'm building and make sure it's going down the right path. If my hypothesis is incorrect, I'm going to stop and go back. That's what Lean UX says. That's why it's so challenging. So you're probably thinking, well, okay, how do we get faster and how do we do more checking? How am I going to get there? Well, here's, I don't expect you to write all this down, but these are questions that if you're doing Agile, you have to ask yourself. You got to do this audit of your team. Now you're doing Scrum. Are you willing to do user testing? If you're getting a lot of no's on all these answers, on this left, you're going to want to go back and think about it, because moving ahead with Lean UX is going to be challenging. And then once you start, you have to really be ready for the whole team to learn together and work together. And this is something that isn't easy. And we've been working through this. It really is a challenge. But these are some ideas for you to keep handy if, throughout this talk today, if you're thinking, yeah, maybe I want to try Lean UX. Think of these questions. These slides will be available later, so you don't have to copy everything down. But think of these questions. Here's something these are going to be the 7 tips that I'm going to cover today. I was trying to figure out how do I articulate what I'm talking about. And so this thing came to me. Originally, I was trying to build the flux capacitor, but that just didn't happen. I don't know. I just kept trying to go back to that. I'm like, this is about science. It didn't make any sense. But this came to me. The top is the top-down approach, right? You've got leadership and executives up there, but then the bottom is grassroots. So over the last couple of years, I've been spending a lot of time on this bottom area, really trying to, build a culture and get people on board with UX. This top part, you'll notice one, executive champion. So Human Factors International, they have, some certification programs that really stress that you need to have an executive champion board. So that's going to be my first tip. I'm going to talk about that. Also, you got to have some kind of guidelines or governance. So if you're just running without any guidelines or any idea of who should be doing what, you need to do that from the top. And this is the last one that really embraces that lean UX philosophy, which is focus on outcomes, not output, this is the mind shift. This is really challenging, but you're going to want to think about what the end user's needs are, not me trying to crank code out and hit deadlines. Is the thing I'm building going to solve the user's challenges, their needs? That's really hard. And then down here, risk analysis is something where you're going to figure out, you can't do UX on everything, right? I mean, you could try, but it's going to be painful. So risk analysis is trying to figure out what are the projects I should be spending UX time on. And then scientific method is going back to 5th and 6th grade. Does my iPhone float? No, it doesn't. I found that out. This iPhone does not float in the bathtub. Also, UCD process and tools. You want to think about that. And then finally, this whole idea about team synergy and building, work around a team. So I'm going to dive into these 7 tips and give you a little bit of insight about them. Some of the top level, I'm going to kind of go through quickly because I think some of the grassroots ones are some of the ones that we can actually do. Some of these top ones are difficult. It's tough to find, an executive champion and do that. So find your executive champion. Definition would be someone that has a budget. If they have budget, go after and see if they can support you because they can actually make some headway and give you the tools and backing you need. So that's my definition of executive champion, is find someone that can help you, understands what you're doing, and then has budget to help influence and represent you at the higher level. This has been an ongoing challenge, but this is something that is within reach. Tip 2 is set up some kind of internal guidelines. We've had one for a while. We're moving toward trying to get a better grasp of this. But this is controlling your colors and your styles. This way, when things are being built, there's a question. There's at least one place to go to, and you can supply everything here and deliver it here. So this is also a challenge. This is something that Nielsen Norman says, step 1, if you're going to do lean UX, you should put more effort into this than you ever should believe. And that's why I put it up at the top, because it's not easy, and it's more of a governance strategy. The last one is this one that, I don't know, I've stated with this like 7 times. I may be dreaming of this, but this is really what it means, is the author just says that the progress is the outcome. What you're doing, that is a mind shift. It isn't these things like, hey, it's cool, we got that email out, isn't that awesome? It should be more like the email got out, but someone actually clicked on it and moved ahead and it solved some challenge they had that day. That would be an outcome instead of we got the email out or we launched some code today. So Lean UX embraces this. This is not easy. This is another not easy. This is why they're up top. These are things that are going to take a lot of effort, probably years and years of repeating yourself and working down this path. This is a slow burn at that top. So that's why I'm going to shift over to things you can do grassroots underneath. So let's go back to Lean UX. Everything that I have here, think, make, and check are from underneath, from grassroots. So these are things that you can do, that we've been doing at Highland to really build this Lean UX practice. But the first one is think in that model. So you're going to think, you're going to figure out what are the things I should be spending my time with UX on, because I can't do everything. So in the Lean UX book, they have a chart that you map basically your assumptions. Like, what are the things you don't know? What are the things that you probably should be spending a lot of time on that are critical for your product? So you're going to map those high-risk items over there, and that's where they recommend you then put all your UX priority in. It isn't, I'm going to do everything. So these are the key things you need to think about when you're really trying to embrace Lean UX, which is if you're going to really embed yourself and work with the team and try to run parallel, you really have to find out things that are important to the business and then also to users. So there's a lot of effort in that corner over there. Here's an example of the assumption worksheet that's out of the book. And once again, you can find this online as well. But this is where you fill this out and figure out what your risks are. It's just a guideline. You don't have to use every one of these questions, but you can see there's business assumptions, there's user assumptions. So this is where you're going to need to work with a product owner or a product manager and figure this out. And with your team together to see, are we on the same page? Because if you're coming from one spot and someone's coming from another spot and you're filling this out, and you're not going to be able to prioritize your work. So this is one of the key critical things that you can do underneath. Is just print this sheet out, get this sheet out of the book, create your own, and fill this out when you're working on a project. I've done this a few times, and it's really helped categorize and move forward the work. So think about assumptions and how to do that. Because when you're doing it, you're probably thinking, I don't know, I'm not sure. Well, if you haven't got the full gist of what I'm talking about today, is I believe with Lean UX and UX, the number one thing that everyone needs to do is move toward more testing. And that's what that diagram showed, from the top and the bottom. You notice in the middle, it was about driving to more testing. Testing will help neutralize and help keep teams focused and let them realize that the thing they're building is either on track or off track, because it's not your feedback, it's the users that are giving feedback. So the more you can test and get into this formative testing cycle and rhythm, it's the better you're going to be, but it's challenging you into that rhythm. So I'm going to share some other things that you can do. But the first thing is fill out that assumption worksheet. Now the next thing is applying scientific method. This is the experiments. When we were kids, we always used to ask, why? Just continually keep asking that question. I don't know why when we get older, we don't ask that anymore, but we should. And that's really what this is thinking about why. Throughout my career, I was supposed to be a lawyer, but I convinced my mom to take a year off before law school. And I got a internship at Q104, and they needed a web page, so I created it. And then that landed me at my first interactive agency for a few years. But what I started realizing is whenever I was working on something, I was always asking why. And that's what I started thinking about. I was always trying to figure out why. Why does somebody build it that way? And then when 2001 hit, this place pretty much went out of business. So then I jumped over to, it was ClevelandHits.com. It was the first online radio station where you could see someone. And I was like, I wore a bag on my head. It was crazy. It was so much fun. But because of Napster, then they went out of business. So then I went over to Progressive Insurance, and I trained in their usability lab. What was fascinating is right around like 1999, 2000 was my first usability test. I actually was creating something that was called Glidden Color at Home, and I never heard of usability testing. And I ran that test, and I was like, oh my gosh, how can I not continue doing this more and more and more? As I've continued to progress down this path, I've continued to do more testing as I've gone down this road. So when I went to Progressive, I trained inside their lab. I learned how to run usability tests. And then I jumped over to insurance.com, an offshoot, and I built my own lab there. And we tested there. And we made a lot of improvements. Even when I went over to the Cleveland Institute of Art, the first thing I asked them was, hey, why? Why are we rebuilding this site? And their question, they looked at me and said, that's right. because we need to get more students. All right, cool. So I wrote that goal on the board. I said more students. So anytime anybody would ever talk about why did we define the site, I always point back to that goal and say, because we've got to get more students here at the school. And then finally, I landed in Highland. I started in the marketing department, and I worked on the redesign of the website. And then I moved over to development to start working on updating the software. And the same thing happened is, we ran testing there. I kept asking why, why isn't there chat on the website? We put chat on the website, and then we started asking questions, with users and finding out what their needs are, and then we applied that. So this whole career path has just been asking why, and started me thinking, like, am I a UX scientist? So I had to bring in my on-base UX lab coat that I wear at trade shows, because if I'm going to talk about science, I'm going to wear this thing. So, it's okay if you keep calm. I'm going to use the scientific method here. It's okay. So, scientific method, going back to 5th, 6th grade, I think that's what it's taught now. It's really, you have a question first, right? You're trying to figure out, what are you curious about? If I put cranberries in Sprite, will they dance up to the top? Yes, they will, because I recently had to do that. But you have a hypothesis, right? You're trying to figure out, can I figure this out? The same philosophy is in Lean UX. This is the core of it. I started thinking about it. It doesn't explain it this way in the book, but it's the basic scientific method. These 5 steps. You ask a question, you predict the answer, you run an experiment, you figure out if it worked, report the results. I mean, I even think about when we were doing A/B testing. It's the same darn thing, but no one ever said, it's scientific method. You're like, no, I'm running an A/B test. It's scientific method. This is the same thing. The same thing with testing. You just need to do more of this, and it's fun. I think if you can get your team rallied around this, everyone's like, yay, scientific method. But really, it just comes down to, what do you want to learn? Whatever you build, just continually ask this question. What do you want to learn? So now, we did all our thinking, right? There are assumptions, scientific method, my brain hurts early now, right? So probably gonna go, you have a snack, and then come back. Now you're gonna make some stuff. So with making, you're gonna use a UCD process. Now ISO, it's a standard. It's the, the International Standards Organization, cites UCD process. Every company has their own. We've got the 4D process, we got the 5D process, we got the 3D process, we got the 2D process. Every company has their own process, right? It's all UCD. It's all the same. So base it on UCD, and then figure out, what are the right tools you're supposed to use at the right time. And that's really the big challenge. Is Lean UX is saying, if you're skipping all that stuff in the beginning, you better know what you're going to do when it's time to test. So this is the basic UCD framework. You've got designing, prototyping, evaluating, and you're doing all the planning. But the biggest thing, this is the biggest thing, if I can tell you one thing from the grassroots level that you can do, go back, is get everybody to start sketching. Get them into a room. Have everybody get around a table and sketch out what they think the interface should be. Sales, developers, get the janitor in there, anybody, get them there and start from sketching. Because it's amazing the things that get created. The person you may think that, they're like, oh, there's no way they can sketch anything. I had a high-level executive sketch something that changed the way the approach of a particular project was going just because of one sketch. And nobody knew it was him in the end, but the idea was on the board, and it was pretty fascinating. So if you can sketch, use the power of sketching, but there's plenty of other things. Paper prototypes, whiteboarding, it's amazing what you can do on a whiteboard. I will not write on this board. But, think about sketching. And it's true, you can design faster on paper than computers. Everyone thinks, oh, a computer. Once you get on a computer, you start thinking about pixels and moving things over. Just get a piece of paper out and sketch it. It's amazing what you can do. So if there's one thing I would say out of anything I've told you today, if you want to get going with Lean UX, and there's a practice in the book how to do that, think about sketching. And then really the tip 7 is checking, right? I mean, this is not easy. This is something that takes lots and lots and lots of energy. Is this building this team synergy? So when we're building something, this is where most of your energy is going to come in, is this number 7, which is you're going to have to work with your team to determine how this is going to happen. How are you going to run testing so fast? You first need to create a testing schedule. I've got an example of one I'll show you here shortly. But it literally is, if you're doing sprints, you base it on your sprint, and you just write out on your board each day the thing you're going to do. I'm going to sketch this day, I'm going to test this day. It's really hard to stick to it. You're probably only going to be able to do it every once in a while, just like we're doing Agile. We raised our hands earlier. I think I'm kind of doing Agile. Kind of doing, I guess, sort of. It's the same thing here. It's really hard to stay with this testing schedule. But here's the other key thing is building a customer pipeline of test participants. This is challenging. I recently started doing some research because we have our in-house tool that we built to keep track of people when they test with us. And I did see that, I think it's Ethio has a solution. They used to just be like a pop-up. It would just come up on your site and you could test right away. But I saw in their long line of products that they actually have now something that can keep track of testing participants. To me, if I'm going to be running testing every week, I better have some people to put it in front of, or you're going to be staring at some walls. So that is really challenging, and you can work with your sales department. You can have surveys that go out to ask people, are you willing to be a research participant? There are ways to build this that you can organically do it. Most companies just kind of like tag team. I'm going to call a recruiter, someone helping recruit usability participants, and you're probably going to pay 100, 150 a head sometimes each one of those people. So if you can build your own in-house, that's something that's really valuable. I would recommend that if you're planning on moving forward with Lean UX, is really build that pipeline. And we've been able to build ours. Probably got almost 1,000 users or so, and we have to make sure we cycle through them. But that is challenging to build. The other thing is we've focused a lot of energy on this. We've built a network of UX champs. So we have champions that are well aware of the UCD process, so that when we bring them into a project, they already know what we're talking about. How many times have you been into a project where you bring somebody in and maybe they've missed the first 2 meetings, and you got to bring them all the way up to snuff, and they start asking questions about everything that you already covered a couple meetings ago? That takes time to bring them up. If someone can come in and already know the process and know the value of it, so we built courses. We built a 2-day course that you can learn about UCD, and then there's 10-week follow-up sessions where we talk about card sorting, usability testing, a whole bunch of other things. And we don't get into too much detail, but we do let them understand the value of it. So when they get back, they understand what UCD is and how that integrates. Another thing is, this is tough, right? Started going to a lot of the stand-ups and the meetings. This takes up a lot of time, especially if you're on a team, you're on multiple teams, trying to figure out how to go to all these stand-ups. But one key thing that really started working was getting into some kind of ticketing board, where there's issues in communication. So things could get marked as UX, bring them to your attention. You can work on those. But these 3 things have been challenging, but there's things that you can do. Really, the last one is this, which is involving your team in all these UX activities. So we talked about the risk assessment, the sketch sessions. If you're going to be writing a test, bring them in, write the test together. Even with the building a prototype, there's things that people can do. Finally, the usability test. We have an in-house lab, so we have the luxury of being able to have people sit in an observation room and then watch what's going inside the lab. But if you're running GoToMeeting or something, you can pipe that into another room, to a conference room, and watch people do it. So even if you have a lab, you can still let people at your organization see the test. If they're involved in the test, they'll see things, and you can have a conversation about it, instead of just throwing them a report later, which doesn't really do that much. Here's an example of a, this is straight out of the Lean UX book, but you can see, if you're in a 2-week sprint or a 3-week sprint, you can really write out the tasks that you need to do. Now, obviously, if I'm going to start the recruiting process, I have that pipeline. So if I don't have that pipeline, that's going to be challenging. Decide what will be tested. So if you have something, you went through that risk assessment, you figured that out, and then you can start, figuring out what will be tested. So, either that is, part of the sketching you're going to do, writing. You see how hyper accelerated this is? This is like you're trying to get this all done in a week. And I've done this in a week, and it is literally crazy. But at the end, when you're getting the results out, you can use them quickly to make decisions. And we're able to at least do 3 rounds of it within the sprint and get the information back so we can make those decisions and improve it. But you can see then there's a testing day, and then you can talk about the steps. Now, once again, Lean UX to the far left is like dreamland, and then far right is how you're currently doing it, and there's somewhere in between that hopefully we could meet to get there. I showed you this diagram earlier, but you can see across the top, like being able to really get those executive champions in line, figure out the guidelines. That focus on outcomes really has been the hardest one to get people's minds wrapped around, which is, thinking about the fact that, okay, I'm just not trying to get code out by the end of the day. I need to get a feature out, I need to get a bug out. Instead, let's rework that and let's get the thing that's going to make the customer happy and get their need. And if it's going to take a couple rounds of rework, let's do it. But generally, the philosophy is we need to get that out. We've got a deadline. We've got to get it out there. We'll figure it out later. Well, there's balance there. And that's why Lean UX has been challenged to companies, because it's making them rethink that. Because so many companies for so long have followed this waterfall philosophy, which is got to get stuff out the door, got to get it out fast. That's, I think, out of anything, that top level is the most challenging. And then you're driving toward testing. So the more testing you can do, the faster you can do that, the better that you will be, because you can use that information to make decisions on. The risk analysis, that assumption sheet. So fill out that assumption sheet, get that together so you can use that with your PO, your product manager, and figure out what the customer needs, what they don't need. Scientific method, right? So going back to 5th and 6th grade and actually asking, what do I want to learn about? Why? Keep asking why. And that's not easy, because every day you generally go in, you have your set schedule, you do the things you need to do. But this is all about building a culture of testing. Just continually getting that every day. I saw, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago at World Usability Day. I think it was like Team W said this, but they said, the way they thought about it was culture is routine. So if I'm going to change culture, she gave the example of, well, every day I wake up and I brush my teeth. Well, what if I want to increase how much water I drink per day? Well, maybe after I'm done brushing my teeth, I'll fill up a cup of water and drink it then. Like, I'm slowly adding some of these things into my routine, and that's going to change the culture. That's why I think sketch sessions is one of the key UCB, one of those tools you can use to change the culture. I had a developer tell me that they hold their own sketch sessions now. They did them in a retrospective one time, and he comes over to our area probably every couple of weeks and says, hey, can I borrow all your sketching supplies? And we have a drawer which says sketch supplies. And he can borrow the paper and clipboards and all the pencils. And he's actually running his own sketch sessions. And then he'll schedule we started weekly office hours where someone can schedule hours with us and talk with us about UC issues or usability issues. And then he'll bring his sketches there and ask us questions. So the biggest tool I would say is sketching. Don't forget to use that. And then when it comes to team synergy, there's a lot there, right? That is a big, loaded arrow. There's a lot of things you got to do there. You're going to have to get people involved and make them understand what you're trying to provide and the value you're giving. And that involves talking with them, not going off and hiding in a corner, which is definitely challenging. So you've got your strategic and your tactical. I focus on that bottom row. If there's things in there that jumped out to you that are helpful. I think if I were to give you some key takeaways underneath the strategic is, once again, you need to find that executive champion, and that is somebody, once again, that has budget. Think about that. Budget. Setting up that internal guideline site, which is not easy. There are many tools out there that will allow you to build that, and I'll easily search for that and come up with some ideas on that. And then this shift to outcomes is going to be an ongoing thing. And if Lean UX is going to have any traction, that number 3 from the top down is the most important. And then within tactical, in the think area, you're going to want to write up, fill out that assumption sheet, use that assumption sheet. That's very valuable. Apply the scientific method. Think about A/B testing and how much fun it is. And then when you're making it, think about using sketch sessions and getting people involved. There's many other things you can do. I mean, has anybody ever done brain writing? Yeah. So that's another tactic, which is brain writing is, instead of brainstorming, which is you sit in a room and ask everybody ideas, and then generally the person that's the loudest pipes up, and then all of a sudden you're done. You give everybody Post-it notes. And you write the question on the board, you set a timer, and you have everybody write it on Post-it notes, and you put them on the wall. At least people that have good ideas can get them on paper, and they won't get, talked over. So think about doing that. That's a very simple thing. I mean, I got to tell you how many times I've used that tactic over, the last 6 months. It's got to be almost weekly, it seems like. I get into a room, there's a lull. Okay, let's put a question on the board. Let's fill out some Post-it notes. People love writing these things out too. And I'll bring some music in. Make sure to bring some music in. Just when there's dead air, people want to hear something. So throw something on. Even if it's your iPhone, stick it on. Put your Pandora channel on. And then really the last one is, when you're checking, when you're doing testing, the key is involve the whole team in your testing. Because most of the time in the past, whenever I ran testing, I would just run it. And then I would send people the results. Here's a video. And they're like, thanks. And then they send an email later. What does this mean? It'd probably be like 3 days later, generally. And it's on a Friday at 4. Right. So then you're typing an email. But if you're just in a room and you could all talk together about it and just put a meeting on, it doesn't even have to be long, a half hour. Still the high-level points. At least you'll get questions on it. It's just so funny how that happens all the time. It seems like simple things, but that's why I like the Lean UX book, is that it talks about simple things, even though it doesn't read simple sometimes. But the way I've translated it is in these steps. So I wanted to leave you with an analogy. I've attempted to run some 5K races and get back out on there, but it's tough, right? I mean, fitness, getting up, you kind of fall off the wagon. Like, and this happens to me so often. But it's the same thing with testing, right? You got to get back up there. You got to lace those shoes up, get back on there, try to do your best. And it is hard. I mean, it is not a simple feat to try to continually run testing. It really is. It is a culture thing. It's something that people have to see value in, but simple things like sketching an idea on some paper and having everybody put them on a board, slap them on a wall, and we'll give little dots, and people can put the things they like the best and talk about their design and go around the room, and you can use these designs then to build something together instead of going over into a corner and hoping your thing works. So, it's this idea of, if you're in doubt, which most of us are, but especially if you're going to be figuring out your priorities and risks. There's a lot of doubt there. Like, I don't know. I think this should work. Just test it. Don't overthink it. I've tested pieces of paper with someone on a phone. They don't care. They're just happy to be on the phone. Some people think this is real. Is that piece of paper, does it go somewhere? Can I, does this work? Is this like iPaper from Apple? It's so thin. Look at it. So just think about testing whenever you can. Anybody have any questions? I know I went through a lot of content. Yes.
When you went to your executive sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
did you use the term lean UX? Or how did you sell this to him? Yes.
Well, we've had multiple executives because there's been a lot of reorgs, so we've kind of start over again. The first round, lean UX was not even known. The book was released, but it wasn't hip yet. Really, the main reason it became big recently is because SAFe 4.5, which is the framework, added it. They put a little sticker on the left that said lean UX, and all of them said, "Whoa, what's this lean UX?" And so we started using it internally. To answer your question, though, we did say lean UX recently, and then we also stressed the outcome over output and kind of drew that out. But what's interesting is the executive in the past has seen tests and has seen people flail on software, and a lot of times just seeing that test is the aha moment. Someone goes, "Oh my gosh, the thing we built doesn't work." It doesn't matter how often you say it; they have to see it.
Right.
So I think if you can get an executive into one of those tests and then also say it, it can kind of help, make that a stronger moment for them to realize how important it is.
Mark, have you ever encountered experiences of the difficult executive where maybe they watch a test and they go, "Well, that's not the kind of customer we want." They make statements like, "Well, paper prototyping doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, develop it. You can't figure it out till it's done." So how do you handle those types of objections?
Yeah, there's a book that talks a lot about this. It's by Eric Schaefer from HFI. I think it's like the institutionalization of UX. It's a really good book. It talks about a lot of these challenges of how to handle those types of questions from executives. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that over the years. The challenges of that. I think what it comes down to is that's why that customer pipeline is crucial, because if you can, the easiest, hole in your armor is, well, those aren't the type of users that are representative of that. But if you can say, well, no, this is an insurance application and that's an underwriter and they would use this, it's pretty challenging to refute those results. So I think, I know there's a lot of books out there by, who's the author? Don't Make Me Think. Krug. He's got a book that says, doesn't matter who the users are, and that's fine. It depends on what you're testing. I mean, for me, I'm testing very vertical specific software. So I need to have those correct participants, or else that could open up a hole. So if I'm just testing a website and I know that, there's probably I got some legway in there, then yeah, I could probably have a little more rope there. So it really just depends on the thing you're testing, and then who that executive is, and then what their prior experience is too, because there's been some negative experiences as well. That they've probably either seen there's something that was introduced that we'll get to later, and we probably all have those stories. Good question.
Are you doing relatively short usability sessions then if you're testing so frequently?
About 30 minutes per session. Try to do like a go-to meeting, and I'll tell the user, hey, it's just about 30 minutes of your time. You should do it at lunch, and you can do it from your desk. And I try to be very respectful. Like if it's getting close, they'll say, hey, we're getting close to 30 minutes. And I'm like, great. And a lot of people will just say, cool, great, I can get off now. So I try to be really cognizant of that time zone, because I want them to come back and I don't want them to have a bad experience.
Do you incentivize them? Or?
Sometimes. We recently did Sprint is a book by Google, and that's another book that would be similar to Lean UX. I tried it last year. It was kind of fun. They said, put a Craigslist ad out and say, I need customers to come in for, local company, $100. And I did that, and I got close to 45 people within like an hour. And then I shut down the survey, and I had them come into Highland. They came in off the street. We needed small, medium business customers because we're building a product that we needed those customers, and it worked. So, and then we rewarded them the $100. So it all depends on, once again, it depends.
Do you tend to test like just one feature with a group, or do you have like 4 features?
I try to keep it to one, because what I'll do is I've got like a standard PowerPoint where I've got the persona, a couple scenarios, and then like the feature that we're trying to build. Now I can't stop somebody from trying to build all the different screens that are connected to it. But most people, if you try to keep them to one thing within, because I'll set a timer and say, hey, we got 15 minutes to draw this out. They'll stick to that because they only have 15 minutes. Some people are like, I wish I had more time, but as long as you're clear, you're only doing one thing and the purpose of it, most people are sports and will be satisfied. Good questions. Yes?
If you're bringing developers into the UX sessions and kind of onboarding them beforehand, is it vice versa too, to where you would, go into their space mid-development stuff and just kind of test and see and answer questions? Like, does that happen a lot, or is it kind of like a black box and you just kind of wait for that to come out?
It's been evolving, so I think it's been going more both ways. I think it has to be, just because of the nature of where the UX is going. It is challenging because you're changing. It's been going that direction. Yeah, as long as you're clear in what you're talking about, and, kind of the goal. And my thing is, as long as I can provide value in that moment, then I think I'm okay. The challenge is if you're just kind of showing up, So I try to go and make sure that there's something I'm going to have specifically talk about. So it's valuable. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me in UX, and when in doubt, test it out. Have a good rest of your day.
Can you play me on?
Yeah.
Can I come on? Can you do something?
Yeah, what do you want to do?
Whatever. Something like that. Some dubstep or maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.